Hi, I'm Derek Fildebrandt. Hi, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard. You're watching The Pipeline today. What's the date today? I don't have a computer in front of me.
17th, 18th, something like that, 18th?
It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Thank you for joining us today. Today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Dave Naylor, news editor of the Western Standard. How you doing, Dave?
I'm suffering, Derek. I'm suffering a bad case of election fever, and I've got glazed eyes from going line by line through the platforms. But I'm surviving.
You've got a bad case of election fever, and the only cure is more cowbell?
More.
Okay. Well, you're wearing a tie today. It's nice.
Yeah, it's election. Got to dress for it.
Or snazzy. And Western Standard Alberta political columnist Cory Morgan not wearing a tie.
No, well, I'm looking forward to the election and the dirt and the scandals so I can take the lowbrow approach that I always
We're going to get you in a hazmat suit when we send you to press conferences.
Yes.
There we go. Well, today, of course, we're going to be talking about the campaign kicking off, where the parties stand, what we can expect in the opening days of the campaign. We're going to break down the Conservative Party's platform, which has been released in full. We've done a pretty thorough analysis of it. We're also going to break down the NDP platform, which was released even before the election was called. It's been released in its entirety, and I've read it so you don't have to. We're also going to be talking about tragedy in Afghanistan as the Taliban takes control of that country following the final withdrawal of U.S. forces and the collapse of the Afghan army. Tragic images coming out of that country. We're going to be talking about what's happened there and what it is going to mean for Canadians and the broader Western Alliance. But before we get started, I want to thank all of our Western Standard members for your continued generous support of what we do. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandardonline.com and click on membership. You can try it free for 15 days. It's only $10 a month or $99 for the entire year. That'll give you unlimited access to bailout-free Western media, supporting media that is not working for the government. So let's kick off the election kickoff news. This election's been called more than 2 years before it was legally scheduled to take place. Dave, it doesn't seem like there's actually that much controversy around it. Polls are showing that even if people don't want an election, they're not going to probably punish the government for calling it.
No, to no one's great surprise, Justin Trudeau called the election on Sunday. Much to his chagrin, the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan kicked a lot of the front page news that they hoped to have, and that led the campaign for the first couple days. We'll talk about that later. The leaders are now out and about, crisscrossing the country, except for the Green leader, and they can't afford to go anywhere, and they're just stuck in.
Is she still leader?
This week.
We'll see if she makes it to the end of the campaign, yeah.
Last I heard, they didn't even have a campaign manager. So platforms have been released for the Tories and the NDP, as you said. Interestingly, polls are showing the gap is narrowing. In fact, in Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area, which will be one of the key battlefields. We did a story this morning, Derek, on the Western Standard Online, that they're basically a tie, which shocks me personally, that the Liberals aren't well ahead, but they're in a statistical dead heat in the GTA. And the other piece of good news for the Tories today is the election win in Nova Scotia. The provincial party there, in a shocking result, upended the incumbent Liberals. They were going for their third consecutive majority term, but were rejected on a campaign basically based on healthcare. So that's also going to give a volt of good news to the federal campaign. So yeah, all party leaders are off and running. Trudeau's spending today in the Vancouver area, Burnaby. Jagmeet Singh also is down east, but he'll be heading back to his home riding in Burnaby pretty soon. O'Toole has kept his campaign Ontario-centric, and so far with an announcement a day of his platform highlights, and we'll see where it goes from here. No great surprises in the first several days. No great scandals yet, but I'm sure they're on the way.
Cory, I think it's fair to say that the early dominating issue, the primary issue at the beginning of the campaign is seldom the same issue at the end, but the dominating issue so far has been vaccine passports and mandatory vaccines for federal government employees. Clearly this was not important enough for Justin Trudeau to get into before he called an election. The election has clearly made it a necessity for him to get into. I think, obviously let's put aside if this is a good thing or bad thing, or if this is good policy or not, just the pure politics of it. I think he's looked at the polls and said the majority of Canadians support mandatory vaccines or vaccine passports that would coerce vaccines. And said that, the minority that oppose it tend to be conservatives. Conservatives are more split on the issue than other parties. So Trudeau comes out and says vaccine passports, even to go between provinces, which is extraordinary. It's one thing about having vaccines for people, non-citizens coming into Canada, but it's quite something to say it's illegal to get on a plane or a train or a bus in Canada and say you can't go across provincial boundaries. That if our Supreme Court was worth anything, that would clearly be unconstitutional. O'Toole came out obviously very uncomfortable with the topic because his own supporters are divided, saying that there will be effective vaccine passports, but if you don't want to get a vaccine, you can get a rapid test. And the equivalent applied for federal employees is you have to get a test literally every single day you show up for work, which is clearly impractical for anyone. I believe some government employees actually want to do a job and actually get to work. How do you think the politics of this has played out? Do you think O'Toole has been able to, primarily the big question is, has O'Toole been able to find the sweet spot political area where he can appear to be enough pro-mandatory vaccination with some people, but not so pro-mandatory vaccination with his base?
I think he's gotten as close as he can with it. He can't go full out for it because he will lose a good chunk of his base to those. Even if it's a minority, it's a very dedicated minority. They do not want to be vaccinated. They do not want to feel pressured to be vaccinated, and they are not going to support a party that they feel is doing that. But the trend is now, you have to push it. I mean, Doug Ford is threatening his entire caucus. He's going to kick them out if they don't get vaccinated now, it sounds like. But he's always been a little bit on the insane side with this whole pandemic. But it's a giant issue. It's a big part of the whole thing. As you said, with that balance, you look at what universities are doing. This is where I think the end of some degree of these vaccine passports is going to come from. As you said, the Supreme Court, they're just allowing any government to use Section 1 of the Charter to set aside all our rights. So they're not going to stand up for us. But when it comes to healthcare unions and civil service unions, when it comes to mandated vaccines, that's when we're going to see the back off. That's when they're going to find compromise. Because there's a number of nurses who aren't going to want to be forced to be vaccinated, though the majority do. When it comes to union court actions, the minority is going to rule. So I think in the long run, we're going to see a lot of these workplace ones and mobility ones thrown out. But for the course of the next foreseeable months, that vaccine passports are going to be the way to go, whether we like it or not.
Trudeau in Markham, Ontario yesterday said there will be, quote, consequences, unquote, for federal employees who don't get vaccinated, which of course sent the unions into a tizzy. So our Manitoba columnist, Linda Slobodian, she's writing a column on that today just about consequences that Canadians may face not being vaccinated. So it's, as you guys say, it's going to be in the courts perhaps before the pandemic is even over.
Yeah. It'll be interesting how this plays out. I mean, obviously the Western Standard has a different take on things than a lot of the government-funded legacy media, but I've never seen media look at things, different kinds of media look at things through the looking glass and get 180-degree different interpretations. The CBC said their headline with O'Toole was O'Toole comes out against mandatory vaccine passports, and the Western Standard headline was O'Toole comes out in support of modified vaccine passports. They are vaccine passports. You have to have them, or you have to get a rapid test every time you want to travel somewhere. Otherwise, I suppose the federal government now believes, under either party believes, it has the power to exile people and imprison them in their province. Because, I mean, in Canada, unless you're living in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, you can't really drive practically between provinces for most things. You got to fly.
Yeah, well, and it gives an out with the testing at least. I mean, I don't know how long a person wants to have a Q-tip shoved out the back of their nose every day, but there is a way to avoid at least the vaccination part. But the media is driving it hard. I mean, I was watching Twitter the other night, and a prominent media member was calling out, and it's not surprisingly just conservative candidates, but one by one going through the list. Hey, are you vaccinated? Hey, are you vaccinated? Like, it's the roll call for those candidates, and it's putting them on the spot. I don't think the public is calling out and screaming for these candidates to take a stand, but the media wants to make sure they're made to take a side on this one way or another. It's not going to go away.
And I know our viewers, our listeners, our readers, they're pretty divided on vaccines. I think the three of us are vaccinated, right?
I'm vaccinated.
See, I'm asking you, are you vaccinated? Are you vaccinated?
Double vaxxed.
Yeah. But, I didn't ask anyone if they were in the office here. It's personal choice. I made the decision for me and my child. It's what's best for me. But people, I think it's a good choice for others to make, but it's their choice to make. But apparently the My Body, My Choice crowd applies only to aborting children, does not apply to your actual body and medical decisions for yourself. It really is something. You see self-proclaimed militant pro-choicers, the Jagmeet Singhs, the Justin Trudeaus, they say, my body, my choice. And you say, well, choices on vaccines, and it's you're a terrible person and you deserve to be locked down in your province in perpetuity.
Yeah, and people just a lot can't seem to find the balance on this one. I mean, I feel vaccines are effective and they're a good idea, but I do not want to see that forced on people at all. That is just, forced medication is dead wrong. It's just like fluoridation in the water, that never-ending issue. I think fluoride's fine, and I'm not worried about all the things people talk about, but at the same, I don't think it's the role of the city to provide it to you. I mean, if you want to get it, go out and get it.
Get a filter for your house. I mean, I'm pro-fluoride, but I'm happy to put a filter on my house if the city's not putting it in the water.
Yeah, but this people taking a stance, and it doesn't stop there. When the mob moves, they always started. You're giving the conspiracy theorists a lot of stuff to chew on, because the stuff you said was conspiracy crap 6 months ago is reality today. The passports are here today. And the talk now is of virtually forcing you to get a vaccine because we're going to cut you off from practically everything if you don't. I hate to say that, but I'm sitting in a world where I think it's going to have to wait for the unions to save me, because if the government's not scared of us, but they are shit terrified of unions.
Well, solidarity forever. Thank God for the unions standing up for our rights here.
Yeah.
I think, to wrap this segment up here, the politicization around vaccines, about trying to force people to take it, even if it's a good idea, trying to force people to take it, I think it creates more resistance to vaccines. I half regret getting vaccinated, not because I think it was a bad medical decision, but because I don't like to be forced to do anything. And if I get one of these vaccine passports, if it comes in a paper form, I'm going to burn it, because using a vaccine passport, I believe would be unethical, because I would be sanctioning a system that punishes people for their own personal choices, even if they're choices I disagree with.
Yeah, but I think it's important to note that this is not just happening in Canada. No. If you're going to want to travel anywhere in Europe, you're going to have a vaccine passport.
Yeah.
If you're going to want to take a British registered aircraft, you're going to need a vaccine passport.
Yeah.
So it's coming around the world. There is resistance around the world. It's not just Canada.
Yeah, and we saw images in Paris, police walking around like other uninvited men in uniforms in Paris, demanding people's papers. Papers, please.
Remember when carding was supposed to be bad?
Yeah. Didn't we just have a big topic after Black Lives Matter and all this police stuff about carding being discriminatory and a violation of people's basic rights? Well, apparently only certain kinds of carding.
Yeah, I don't know. We're in a bizarre time, and time will just have to pass by, and once this thing subsides, I hope some sanity starts to prevail.
Well, we're going to move on to the Conservative platform that we've done an analysis of, kind of go through the key points that are there. But before we do that, we want to thank one of our important sponsors, the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. The CCFR is working vigilantly for you every day, protecting your right to own, use, and purchase firearms safely in Canada. They're doing fantastic work. They're lobbying politicians. They're doing advocacy, speaking out for you. I know gun owners, we don't have time. We don't go protest because we're not allowed to bring our guns. So, you know, while we can go out and hunt or go to the range, they're out doing this full time, and they do a fantastic job of it. So make sure you support them. Go to firearmrights.ca and click Why Join to learn more about why you should become a member of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. So we're going to turn now to the Conservative Party's platform. Aaron O'Toole, Conservative leader, released his party's platform on the very first day of the campaign. It's an unusual move. It's been done before. Mike Harris did it famously in 1995 with his Common Sense Revolution platform. Put it all out. I mean, the campaign strategies are divided on if you want to do this or not. The big downside is you can't trickle out a news story every day and try and dominate the headlines with your latest promise, sometimes big promises, sometimes little promises. And then you kind of release the whole thing. You bundle it all together and release it at the end of the campaign or around the leaders' debate. The other strategy is to do what they've done here, which is just put it all out. No one can accuse you of a hidden agenda then, at least credibly. It's all there. And we've gone through it in some detail. Dave, why don't you just kind of give us the highlights, and then we'll go through some of the pieces.
Yeah, I personally like the releasing of the platform at the beginning. It gives voters a chance to go through it at their leisure.
Do you know how late we've had to work over this stuff? I like trickling it out. It's a lot easier for
fingers
the
are
voters.
bleeding. My fingers are bleeding. And speaking of firearm rights, one of the things they're going to do is get rid of the liberal gun grab, which of course the Liberals are jumping up and down, saying there's going to be blood flowing in the street.
Assault rifles. There'll be assault rifles.
Assault rifles.
Which is great. I'm going to buy one.
Yeah, well, they haven't been legal in Canada for how long?
60, 70 years? 60 years? But if they are legal, I'm buying one. I'm buying 12.
Now I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Thinking of you armed with a automatic weapon.
Got to keep discipline around the office.
Yes, very true. So yeah, anything you want to know in there about any policy is in there. The only thing that's not mentioned, Derek, is equalization and the balanced budget. Absolutely no plans in there to balance the budget other than a pie-in-the-eye statement saying it'll be done in a decade. The Parliamentary Budget Office, you'll remember a week or so ago, said currently it won't be balanced until 2070, long after we're all dead. But there's stuff in there about revamping the immigration system, propping up and helping unions and employees' savings accounts and employee trusts to buy companies. The carbon tax, the flip-flop carbon tax, explained in detail. You remember in April, it was the political U-turn of the century when he came out and only weeks ago had signed a pledge to never bring in a carbon tax, and he did. All that is explained in detail there, how you're going to get a fancy little debit card to go out and buy electric scooters. But any issue you want in there is there. People can go through it at their leisure and see what the Conservatives have to offer.
You drive an electric scooter to work, right?
I do. You should see me in my helmet.
It's sight to behold.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. We're obviously we can't go through the entire thing. So when we went through, we put together kind of the most important eye-grabbing parts. There's good and there's bad. Kind of gave each one a letter grade. I got to admit, on both the Conservative and the NDP platforms, we had to grade on a curve because there's a lot of bad, and I don't want to be just negative. So mostly the things with positive letter grades, they're less important, but we had to say something positive. In the positive category is on guns, undoing the cabinet order and one piece of legislation from the Liberals that is just confiscating tons of firearms that are no more dangerous than any other, but that the Liberals think look scary. Looking scary is very important to Liberals. So we've got guns. What else was positive? We'll talk about... we'll go through the good first.
Yeah, the other broken promise we should mention and get out of the way is the CBC. He campaigned in both the leadership of the party and immediately afterwards that he was going to defund the CBC. No, not quite. He's going to review the English language operations. He's actually going to add a division.
Review the mandate.
Review the mandate. He's going to add a division into Radio Canada for, specifically for them to protect French broadcasting. But, nothing there about cutting the $1 point something billion of taxpayers' money they get every year.
Yeah, so he's going to review the mandate. I think this is the worst of both worlds. What he's going to do is he's going to anger the CBC. He's going to remind their reporters and their management that they're afraid of Conservatives, so they're going to continue to act as an attack dog for Trudeau. But even if he was to somehow form a majority government and do this, he wouldn't be doing much anyway. It was a similar mistake to what Stephen Harper made. Stephen Harper cut a very small amount of the CBC's budget, and the CBC went to absolute war with him in 2015, more so than they did in the past. They were a huge reason that Stephen Harper and the Conservatives lost the 2015 election, having the CBC go at them the way they did, to no gain, because they didn't really cut much of the CBC budget anyway. If you're going to go after the CBC, you privatize it. You say, it's sold, we're going to defund it, maybe we'll keep a little bit for the far north, or we'll contract out some broadcasting services for the far north where there is nothing and they should have some kind of news, fine. But you kill it, and you kill it dead. You don't, if I wanted to get rid of Dave, I don't walk over and just poke him in the eye. I have to shoot him. Because I poke Dave in the eye, he's probably going to punch me in the face, right? So you got to pick, and this is the problem with Conservatives and the CBC. They poke it in the eye, and then they don't do anything about it. So it's a missed opportunity. So let's kind of go good news and bad news. We've already done a little bit of bad news, but let's go to some good news, which is related to CBC, but on the so-called ostensibly private media, the media bailout. The Conservatives are following through, saying they are going to end the $600 million a year media bailout. Good news, any way you cut it, unless you're a part of the old legacy government-funded news. That's now something they're reliant upon. That is probably going to create some more unfavorable coverage indirectly for the Conservatives, but a definite positive. Refugee policy. This has not gotten any real pickup in the rest of the media that I've seen outside the Western Standard, but hidden in there was some really good policy, less about immigration than it is about refugees. You've got, I know when my grandparents came to Canada, they were privately sponsored. They were sponsored by a church, and the way it worked is if my family went on to welfare or needed any government benefits whatsoever, the church had two options. They could pay for it themselves, or they could put us on the next ship back to Hamburg. There was no risk to the taxpayer. And we still do have some privately sponsored refugees in Canada, and they are, across the board, almost unanimously more successful. They have a higher rate of getting a job, better rate of having a good job, better rates of learning unofficial language. They are incredibly less likely to be involved in crimes, incredibly less likely to be reliant upon government assistance. Privately sponsored refugees mean that you have a person or an institution like a church or a charity that is responsible for them, and they take direct ownership over the problem. It's not some faceless bureaucracy that just sees them as a number. And so the Conservative platform talks about moving to a 100% privately sponsored refugee program, with a few exceptions. If a guy shows up on the shore and there's a guy in another boat behind him in the Taliban and he's shooting at him, we're going to let him on. That's okay. I'm okay with that. So I think it's a hugely positive move forward in that area.
One of the interesting things they're also going to do, Derek, is prioritize workers who want to come in and work in the long-term care industry to get foreign workers working in the old folks' homes and stuff like that. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Cory, was there anything positive that we haven't touched on in the platform that you saw?
I think you've touched on the positives already for the most part.
It's
good to see
two
pragmatic, rational refugee immigration sort of discussion, because it's been a weak spot. I mean, that's where they have poked and tried to point out Conservatives as being paranoid or anti-immigrant or things like that. So coming right out.
Well, it's not saying less or more refugees. They weren't talking about that, but they were talking about just how we deal with it. And that is one of the big problems, is the burden to the Canadian taxpayer. And frankly, we're not really helping people too much if we get them to Canada and they're on welfare. They don't have a job. They can't speak the language. Then they're more likely to get into crime, onto government assistance. This is going to mean for not necessarily more or less refugees, but it's going to make for more successful refugees. Well, there's a lot of that, and Dave already touched on the budget. For the first time that I'm aware of in modern history of the Conservative Party, they did not release a costing of their budget, just a bunch of promises with a bunch of spending attached to it, but no costing. Now, they're saying that they're waiting for the Parliamentary Budget Officer to review it. It's good that actually this stuff goes to the Parliamentary Budget Officer because it's a more honest and independent accounting of platforms and the parties themselves. Parties make up all sorts of wacky stuff to make the numbers fit on their platforms. I remember Rachel Notley forgot $1 billion when she was running for Premier in 2015. Just left $1 billion out. Oops. So it's good to do that, but generally it makes sense to release your own costing as well, and you could say we're going to update this based on what the Parliamentary Budget Officer says. But I'm not sure why you would release a platform with a bunch of spending promises if you haven't already accounted for it. Why would you say we're going to do this, but we have no idea how much it's going to cost?
Because it works. That's exactly how the Progressive Conservatives won in Nova Scotia. I mean, that's part of it. It looks like a Conservative victory, and technically it is. But if you look at that campaign, they proposed the most spending out of all three major parties.
No plans to balance the budget.
No plans on how they were going to do it. They just promised everything and anything, and I hate to say it, but it worked. So perhaps why give the voters the blood and guts and the reality of how you get there when you can just make the promises and figure out how to deal with it after you get in?
Yeah, and O'Toole has clearly stated several times already, he has no plan to balance the budget. He says, I'm going to do it over a decade. And we've talked about this before. A decade, 10 years. That would require 3 back-to-back majority Conservative governments. The last Conservative leader to do that was Sir John A. Macdonald. And I just have a sneaking suspicion that Aaron O'Toole is just a little bit ambitious for believing he is going to be the only Conservative leader in history to match Sir John A. Macdonald. It's just, I'm not going to put my money that he could do that. So there is a 0.0% chance Aaron O'Toole would balance the budget if he was elected Prime Minister, unless we had the greatest economic boom in Canadian history and he didn't tack any extra spending onto that. Highly unlikely to happen. We did a word search of the platform. How many times did Alberta come up? Oh, no, was that the NDP one we did that with?
No.
It was
it was the
okay.
NDP.
Okay, we'll come to that later. But there's a ton of promises around Quebec. Promise that the federal government will not intervene in the courts with Bill 21. That is a clearly racist piece of legislation that, I don't think it's a good bill. It's a very bad bill. It's discriminatory. But I'd like Alberta to adopt it anyway, just to see what would happen, just to see the reaction. Like, let's not enforce it, because it is terrible. Don't enforce the bill. But let's pass the racist bill and just see what Ottawa does. They will fight us in the courts every step of the way. The media will lose their shit. And we'll just see what happens. Like, let's pass it word for word, just translate it into English, pass it here, change, we'll just do a Google, we'll do a word replacement in a Word document. We'll just change Quebec to Alberta and French to English, and we'll just see what happens. They've said that the Conservatives will not challenge it. We did a word search of the phrase balanced budget. It appears only once in the entire document. And that is in reference to saying that in balancing the budget, they won't cut transfers to Quebec. That is the only time that the word balanced budget comes up, is saying we won't cut transfers to Quebec. So tons of promises around Quebec. Quebec gets automatic seats on the CBC now. I must have missed the part about Alberta and Saskatchewan getting seats.
You did.
Small print. I just didn't see it. Must have been not reading carefully enough. But they also don't, on the West, they don't really get into equalization. They acknowledge that Alberta's getting screwed. They give a little lip service to the problem, but they're not touching equalization. They are not touching that with a 10-foot pole. What they are promising is more federal spending going into the Fiscal Stabilization Fund, which Jason Kenney never talked about before until it became clear nothing's happening on equalization. Then he starts talking about this, which he calls an equalization rebate, which it is not. It actually has nothing to do with the equalization program. It's a short-term Band-Aid to give us more money, but it will do nothing to stop sending our money to people who don't like us. Cory, do you think there was any way that Aaron O'Toole could touch equalization?
Not really. The reality is what we're seeing with this platform, like you're talking about, it's standard. It's a platform that's trying to win in the reality of what Canada is. There's no sense catering to the West, even if that is your base of support, because there's little to gain. You need to win Quebec. You need to win Ontario. You need to maybe try and maintain a few seats in the Maritimes. And if you go after equalization, you're not going to win them. So, yeah, you can pay lip service to Alberta on the way up, as you do with carbon tax or even defunding the CBC. But when the campaign comes along, everything's...
Well, to be fair, Aaron O'Toole never even promised during the leadership campaign to do anything about it. Well, he said, he gave a vague, nebulous promise that he'll review it or...
Yeah,
but,
it's just like supply management. They're not going to touch it.
No, they did touch supply management. They said they love it.
Yes, okay.
They did touch supply management.
Yes.
They love it, and they're going to defend it. Our Soviet-style production of eggs, milk, and cheese is critical for Canada.
And that's much of this. This is a solid... unfortunately predictable campaign, strategically modeled to try and win the election. So he's going to stay away from regional type of issues that really don't benefit him.
That aren't Quebec.
Yeah, Quebec and Ontario.
Yeah, he did promise swimming pools for Nova Scotia.
That is true.
Yeah, he's going to build a big federal swimming pool.
After that shark attack, I could see the demand. So...
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in there. Loving unions. I mean, I read the NDP platform. It's obviously not as strong as that, but it's very much a big change in tone from previous Conservatives, which try to stay kind of neutral on unions, to we like unions, unions are great, unions are important, unions are going to get all kinds of new special rights under Aaron O'Toole. But let's go to O'Toole taxes. Do you remember in 2015, 2015 election, Stephen Harper was warning about Trudeau imposing a Netflix tax, and the media all laughed about that? Well, Trudeau has now got plans for a Netflix tax, and the O'Toole platform, and as we'll mention later, the Singh platform, they're all hot on a Netflix tax. O'Toole wants to tax your Netflix. Cory, is that a winner?
I don't know if it's a winner, but again, it gets back to what they want to propose to do with it. And I mean, Trudeau's justification, the rest were always, it's for the protection of Canadian content. It's protectionism. And when you say protection of Canadian content, translate French. So yeah, it's another play for Quebec. It's just embedded as it tends to be with most policies, and again, not terribly unexpected.
Okay, and of course we dealt with carbon tax. I mean, the greatest flip-flop I've seen in my lifetime politically. I've never seen one that monumental.
When you'll stand next to a screen and sign on a press
sign
conference,
a massive pledge,
saying outright, "I will not do this." And
the closest I can remember was Ontario Premier Dalton McGuinty when he was first running in roughly 2003 against Ernie Eves in Ontario. He signed a giant pledge saying he promises not to bring in any more taxes. He got elected. And he signed a big Canadian Taxpayers Federation pledge, and then he flip-flopped.
And going a bit before your time, but the Liberals completely flip-flopped on abolishing the GST. The only one who fell on her sword over that, of all people, was Sheila Copps.
Yeah.
And, well, Chrétien didn't pay a high price for that flip-flop in the long run, unfortunately, but they were very clear that they were going to end NAFTA and abolish the GST.
We didn't mention that, Dirk. I don't know if you consider it a good thing or not, but the Tories will promise a GST holiday in May.
Yes.
You can get all your Christmas shopping done and not have to worry
in
about...
December.
Yeah, sorry, in December, I'm sorry. Get all your Christmas shopping done and not have to worry about paying the GST. Whether or not they're going to make it easy for businesses remains to be seen, but a little bit of good tax news.
Well, I don't know. I would like an actual tax cut, not just a little gimmicky holiday. I mean, obviously retailers have been hurting, but I mean, Christmas is their time. I'm not sure if you want to actually increase retail sales, you should have a GST holiday in January when they're actually hurting. Well, if you're going to be doing this, you do a GST holiday in January, not when people are already buying stuff.
Absolutely, and the CFIB roasted that, because what's your average consumer going to do? You know what retail sales are going to look like in the last week of November? You're not going to be able to give your product away, because you can wait a week and get a 5% discount on everything you buy, or depending on what product. Well, I guess it's just the federal. So it's not.
If I'm owning a retail store, I close down for November.
You might as well.
Just close your doors. Say we'll be open.
Yeah.
Free stuff.
But he had to dangle a goodie, I guess. I mean, Trudeau came out with the check to seniors, and now, well, here we give you a GST holiday.
Look, if you want to cut the GST. I mean, the GST is a less harmful tax than income taxes. Every economist will tell you that. But we all hate it because we see it. If you want to cut the GST, I'm in favor of a tax cut. So fine. It'd be broad-based and it's permanent. But this kind of thing is just gimmicky. I mean, he's quite literally playing Santa Claus. So I don't know. Why
also
don't you cut my
throws-
income taxes?
I'm sure Jane is cursing at home because it throws a loop into all the bookkeepers and the rest because you get this 1 month now where you're buggering around where you're not remitting 5%.
Oh yeah, it's going to be an accounting nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to deal with all sorts of accounting here at the Western Standard and GST and stuff, and I think we're going to continue to charge GST because we're not retail, but maybe we don't. I don't know, but it'll be a pain in the ass.
Well,
how do I not charge for 1 month? Not charge everyone GST for 1 month and then have to charge them GST on the next. It's an accounting nightmare.
More money for our accountant, I guess.
Accountants will love this. Okay, well, and I do want to emphasize the conservative platform is not all bad. I mean, I know we can beat up on them, but that's because we believe. I don't call myself a conservative. I'm a libertarian, but I'm definitely on the right. I've voted conservative at times in the past. I've never voted for parties on the left. I want to see conservatives be better. I want Canada to have a good conservative party that I might see myself voting for one day. And that's, I think, why I'm a little tough on it, and as are some of my colleagues, is we want to see a good conservative party campaigning and executing conservative policies. And that's why we're rough on it. But if you thought that was rough, we're going to get to the NDP platform in a second. But before we do, we want to thank another of our sponsors. Why don't you do Resistance Coffee?
Resistance Coffee. I love doing Resistance Coffee.
It's your stuff.
It's one of those things. We're drinking it at home. I had to lead by example. I mean, it was a gamble. I ordered Resistance Coffee online. They delivered to my house, but chances are, even though they got those awesome names like Liberal Tears and Defund the CBC, I mean, it might have been awful. I might have had to fake it and say, this is good stuff. Order it. No, I don't have to. And these guys, so they are the
Have you
opposite.
been faking it?
Not on the coffee. We could do a whole other show on other stuff later. But either way, these guys are great. They're pushing back
got
against
them
those.
flustered.
I guess there's so many digressions I can go with here. Back to the sponsor. We're going to look
It's a good thing it's not a red screen because Cory would fade into the background.
So, back to that damn coffee. These guys give 10% of your purchase to good causes. They're standing up for individual rights. And if you go to resistancecoffee.ca and you look, and they'll show who they're giving it to, like the JCCF and other ones that are standing up for your individual rights. 10% of your purchase goes towards that. Plus, if it's your first time buying, there's a promo code box. You put Western Standard in, all one word. You get 10% off that first purchase as well. If you order, I think it's over, I'm not going to guess here, $60 worth or something. It's free shipping even. Comes right to your door. Only took a couple of days to get to us. Fantastic coffee, good stuff. Your money's not going to go to some left-wing cause. And stay tuned next week, and I'll talk about what I was faking it with.
Trying to attract viewers or repel them?
Well, I'll change them.
Well, I've never been faking it.
Well, I feel dirty hearing that.
All right, well, let's move on to something else dirty. Let's go to the NDP platform. Dave, we've actually not yet published our review on it. I was actually just kind of working on one of the first drafts when we had to get in here for the show, but you've gone through it, right?
Well, yes. It can be summed up in 3 words, Derek. Spend, spend, spend. I think we've identified 25 separate stories we'll be doing over the next day or two. And
See, I don't know why you don't prefer trickling out a platform. 25 days and 25 stories on one platform in a matter of days, that's a lot to bite off.
It is. And we're doing it so you, dear viewer, don't have to. Everybody gets more money. I think you called it a socialist dream. Even the CBC will be rolling in even more taxpayer money. So again, nothing in there, I don't think, about balancing the budget. But
I didn't see the word once.
No. I think we said Alberta got mentioned 3 times.
No, 0.
0.
There's no. If you do a word search, the word Alberta never comes up once. Saskatchewan does come up one single time, only insofar as they're referring to Tommy Douglas. So
very obviously very heavy on Quebec stuff, but every sector of the economy gets more cash. Bottom line, and who's going to pay for it? Nobody knows. How are they going to pay for it? Nobody knows. I think as Cory says, it seems to work. Promise the world with no plans on how you're going to pay for it.
Okay, so as I said with the Conservative platform, we graded these things on a curb. It's not, when we compare the platforms, it's not apples to apples, because we expect more out of the Conservative platform, I think. But I tried really hard to find some things that aren't terrible. And we were able to find that even in the NDP platform, because we're nice guys. So let's got to go through the nice things. And I'm sure some of our listeners and viewers are not going to agree with me on this, but I actually thought they had a really good point on drugs, on illicit drug use. The NDP are kind of leading the pack on this one, I think, from a libertarian view. They, although it's not for libertarian reasons they're doing it, I think they just like drugs. I think that's probably it. Or they're on them.
Well, you got to consume something to read that platform.
Yeah. I felt like I was on shrooms the entire time. But the NDP are, I think, have got actually, out of the three big parties, actually the best approach to drugs. It's about decriminalizing the use of drugs and redoubling police efforts on traffickers, on pushers. No one has ever quit drugs because the government put them in jail. No one who's ever people go to jail and they do more drugs 99% of the time. Addicts deserve, I think, treatment and compassion. Putting them in prison is just not going to fix it. And I think the NDP have got, they're actually on the right, I can't believe I'm saying this, for God's sakes. They're on the right track in this specific policy area. Take the resources you're spending going after people who are addicts for the most part, and put it going after the traffickers. At the same time, they also want to get more aggressive on expunging the criminal records of people who have been convicted of having small amounts of cannabis before it was legalized. Absolutely. I would imagine we probably did something similar when Prohibition in Canada ended in the some point in the 20s. It's not illegal anymore. It's no longer a crime. You should therefore not have a criminal record for it. Cory, how do you feel about drugs?
Well, it depends on what we're taking and what the party is. But as far as where they're going, though, I mean, seriously, it's an area I've always been big on. I'd like to see rehabilitation. And from a libertarian or even just a conservative point of view, it's a smart way to go. Like, guys, you're paying for these addicts already, whether you like it or not. You're paying for them in the hospital system, in the justice system, in general welfare, in property damage, you name it. I mean, the homeless, addicted people are costing a fortune if you just want to look at the cold, hard costs. For every one you can get out through treatment and perhaps get straight and get into the working world, we benefit. I mean, they're no longer draining, they're contributing. Criminalizing these guys, as you said, it's been a failure, it doesn't work. So, I mean, good on the NDP to point out that this is the way to go. Quit chasing after these guys, trying to throw them in jail. Let's chase after them and try and get them into rehab, which is still not easy, but it would have a lot more benefit for us and them for every successful case you could find.
So, they've got some proposals around EI. I'm going to talk about one little good part there, and that's the last of the good stuff I could find, really. Oh, actually, no, they had some stuff around BC salmon fisheries that are tough. So there's kind of two broad kinds of salmon farms. There's the onshore ones, which you can imagine as a big fancy swimming pool with a bunch of fish in it. And then there's the offshore ones, and they're essentially floating farms. And unfortunately, they are extremely damaging to the environment. All sorts of pollution that comes from the waste and the feed, and disease, and they are disease. They're disease farms, and what they do is they spread diseases to the natural salmon, and they're damaging habitats. It's unfortunate stuff because it's an honest living. I don't think there's anything wrong with salmon fishing. Love salmon, but it's damaging, particularly to the wild salmon stocks. The NDP are talking about finding a reasonable transition plan to move from the offshore salmon farming to onshore, which is not really impactful to the environment. It's more expensive to do, but it's producing bad quality fish. It's hurting the wild salmon fisheries, which is not fair to those farmers. So a little bit of good stuff there, I think, as long as the transition is reasonable and fair and recognizes that people put a lot of money into capital for these things already. Tiny little bit of good on EI. They want to make it so, right now if you want to collect EI, you got to get laid off. If you get fired for cause, or you just want to go back to school and upgrade your skills so you can come back into the labor market and make more money. You can't do that. I don't think that's fair, especially if you've been paying into EI your whole life. You're a hard worker, never lost a job, but you want to go back to school so you can come back and make more money. You're, say you're an entry-level nurse and you want to come back as a nurse practitioner. Well, right now you can't draw EI for that, so they're talking about allowing that. And good stuff there. It's all downhill from here. All downhill. On EI, they're going to make it more generous for everybody, though, including quote-unquote seasonal workers, which is Latin for Atlantic fishermen. We remember, we've got the pogie culture that still exists out there. It's less extreme than it used to be. They want to go back to an older system where they could literally fish for 2 months and then collect pogie for the rest of the year. Terrible, crazy stuff. They want everybody. They've got a whole list of stuff for EI. I can't get into the thing. It's too much. Cory, there's a bunch of stuff on unions there, banning replacement workers during strikes, strengthening union power in all sorts of ways, basic guaranteed income without cutting back the welfare state at all, just tacking this stuff
more
on.
money.
Any of that stuff surprising for you?
No, I mean, the bottom line is we could look at how the NDP were going to come into this campaign one of two ways. I mean, they were either going to perhaps hope they could turn Singh into the next Jack Layton and actually start contesting, like really threatening to perhaps become a player to win an office, or they could just stick true to their socialist roots, their principles, and just put out an unrealistic wish list of socialist dreams and flog those and push, and their hope is to impact the election. Their hope is to be a voice in the House of Commons, but never actually be in power in the House of Commons. So they clearly chose to swing left, stick to that, and maybe hope hold the balance of power so they can really push hard left when the next government.
Well, I think the NDP has to, because there's no point to the NDP if the NDP is pretty much the exact same as the Liberals or even to the right of the Liberals. Trudeau in 2015 swung to the left of the NDP where Thomas Mulcair had them. Thomas Mulcair was dedicated to balanced budgets, not very strongly, but a little bit. And Trudeau said budgets will balance themselves, which Aaron O'Toole effectively has too. He said, like, we're just going to grow the economy and the budget will balance itself. Not exact quote, but that really is summing up what he said. So the NDP have reacted to Trudeau's pretty hard left turn by just going into total cuckoo bananas.
Yeah, they're not even pretending, but I mean they'll corner their support in those areas where that's strong. Lower Mainland BC, a few Toronto, Quebec ridings, maybe a Prairie Socialist or two. But I mean there were always two kinds of NDP. I mean there was the Romano MDP, in the past as well, and compared to what Singh is putting out, I mean those guys are hardcore conservatives. But if you want to.
Romano was a hardcore conservative to Aaron O'Toole.
Yeah, well, he knew, though, he had to get realistic if he actually wanted to win and form office. And there's no illusions on the part of the Singh NDP that's not their goal. They're stuck on the ideology. So, fair enough.
Yeah. Taxes, there's just nowhere to start. Like, their section on, I can't get into it. It's just so long. 75% capital gains tax. So any of you, if Jake
castrated economy, I can't think of a better way.
If Jake Meeting's prime minister and you want to start a business, think of something else. I'd be like, just who the hell would invest in anything with a 75% tax? It's madness. Wealth taxes. So now taxes not even on your income, just for having it. Well, I'm sure Turks and Caicos and all kinds of other tax havens will be very happy if Jake Meeting becomes prime minister because everybody's moving their money over there. I don't have a bunch, but whatever I have, I'd move it overseas. That would be insane. There's just nowhere to go from there. Carbon taxes. He is virtually a carbon copy position as Trudeau and O'Toole. So the three parties agree there. Carbon taxes are great. Three parties all agree in supply. Yeah, they support supply management. In fact, Aaron O'Toole's language, like they both say the same thing, but the language around it about how much they just, God, love supply management. Aaron O'Toole was even more socialist than Singh, by quite a bit. But it's still the same policy. They just really wanted to emphasize they love supply management. CBC, as you mentioned, Dave, more money. NDP promised they're going to get rid of the media bailout, though, right? That's a trick question. No.
Trick question.
No, absolutely not. Love the media bailout. Everyone should work for the government. Deficit, O'Toole at least mentions the word. I could be wrong, I have to do a word search, but I don't think I saw the word deficit or balanced budget anywhere in the entire thing. Why don't you tell us about some of their energy transition?
No, continue. You're on a roll.
You just haven't read it yet. Okay, well, I haven't really sent you my drafts yet. Okay, so that's fair. Just shut down the energy industry. It's what amount. It's a total shutdown. Doesn't mention the word Alberta once, as I said. It mentions Saskatchewan once, but only in reference to St. Douglas. But just says, we're shutting it down, and we'll provide EI for you and some transition training. So all of you watching and listening who are working in the oil patch, you will get retrained to assemble solar panels and engineer some windmills. That sounds great. I'm sure kids who are from poor families and go straight into the patch trying to earn a decent living, I'm sure they'll be very happy about that change.
Well, there'll be some good labor jobs too for people with big fans to blow on the windmills on the days when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing too. So this will be a good make work project. And
Do you remember when Trump was first running for office and all the Americans said, if Trump wins, we're moving to Canada? Well, you know what? If Jagmeet Singh wins the election, they'll be moving trucks headed the other way at the end of next year.
We'll at least transfer our money offshore. That's really easy. I've actually already had some family flee Canada because they're done with lockdowns, they're done with mask mandates, done with they suspected to be mandatory vaccinations. I've had some family already flee down to the United States, Florida. So, I'm not moving anywhere because I think Western Standard is going to have. We're kind of counter-cyclical. The worse the government is, the better the better the news is. So I'm not going anywhere, but I'm definitely moving every penny I own offshore. You know what? I'm canceling the rest of this list. It's just too much crap. And I'm otherwise having a good day.
Yeah.
So
as Cory said, if you have no chance of winning the election, promise the world, and you'll get away with it with some people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's leave the NDP circus for there. Let's go to the very dark circus unfolding in Afghanistan. Dave, why don't you set it up?
Extremely horrible stuff going on, Derek. The Afghan army basically collapsed and fled, and I think it took the Taliban 3 days to take over the entire country. Unbelievable pictures of Afghans climbing aboard moving planes, falling from the skies as they tried to hold on to get out any way they could. The Canadians had to hire Gurkhas, the legendary Nepalese soldiers to.
I thought you meant pickles.
No.
Gherkins?
Gurkhas.
Which one is it?
Gherkin is the pickle.
Okay.
The Gurkhas are the one that slit your throat in the night and you never knew they were there. So thanks to their efforts, all our Canadian staff and JTF soldiers were able to get out. Of course, Canadians left the Gurkhas behind initially, which caused outrage. And the Prime Minister Trudeau said this morning they have been able to get them out to safety now. But horrible, horrible scenes. If you're a veteran that died protecting Kandahar, you're turning over in your grave. The West is being accused of abandoning these poor people. Joe Biden standing by his decision, saying, we can't be there forever. The Afghans have to fight for themselves. The Taliban already bringing back Sharia law. Our Linda Slobodian has talked to veterans and people working with the translators that are now behind, trying to get them out. And it's utter panic and it's utter devastation, especially for these people who have spent a decade risking their lives to help Canadian troops being abandoned and left to what would be a certain gruesome fate.
Yeah, I grew up in military towns, Army and Air Force towns around Canada, and so I've got a lot of buddies who served in Afghanistan, a lot of friends whose dads served in Afghanistan. It was very personal for me because I knew people right after 9/11 who went to Afghanistan, fought there. And some of my friends who came back were not the same. Some are still suffering in very serious ways. I mean, I suppose every war always has a losing side, and they feel frustration and hopelessness that the loss and what was it all for when you lose. And the frustration here is similar to Vietnam. We never lost the battle. We won every single battle, but we have lost the war. And I do agree, we cannot be there forever. America and the West should not be world policemen. But I think we made a grave mistake in trying to bring freedom to a place in the world that, I hate to say it, is probably never going to be free, at least in the next few lifetimes. Maybe our great-great-grandkids might know a different world, but you can't change a people unless you're willing to commit damn near war crimes to subdue them.
Sure.
And I don't think we should be willing to do that.
And the Russians tried, the Americans tried. This is at this moment an unconquerable country. And what it has done is it's taken over the election news cycle for a couple of days and focused maybe a little bit on veterans. You'll all remember the last election campaign when Trudeau told that veteran who lost a leg that they have no more to give. And veterans, the money spent on veterans will once again become a key campaign issue, I think.
It's funny, I'm actually reading a book on Alexander the Great right now. And that's the first man we at least are aware of in history who tried to conquer Afghanistan. It just doesn't work. I'm not one of these people who says we should have never been there. I mean, they attacked our ally. They murdered thousands of innocent people. They deserved what they had coming to them. But in the long term, we got to really rethink here when we have to intervene. Not like Iraq where we didn't have to intervene, but where we actually do have to do something. What's our long-term goal? Is it we show up, we knock out the bad guys and say, okay, you get McDonald's, strip clubs, and Facebook? Or are we just going to make sure we just have someone who's friendly to us there, and they might be, as they said about Pinochet, he might be a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. I mean, I think we need to take a more realistic view of how we deal with the world and not be policemen. It just doesn't work.
It certainly didn't work in Afghanistan, and I think the message has to be, look, we'll leave you alone. You guys can figure it out yourself. But if you send any harm our way, we will turn your rubble into even smaller rubble, and act swiftly and decisively on any terrorist action that comes from there.
Yeah. Cory, do you think there was any way around this?
I'm glad to see them pulling him out. 20 years of being there, and as we've seen, it didn't change the culture of the place. It didn't change the nature of it just being vulnerable to be run by the extreme fundamentalist element of Islam. That's just what that place seems to be about. I mean, it took 3 days and bang, they're back. So they really accomplished, and I hate to say it, 158 Canadians died over there. Thousands got injured, and many more, as we said, with injuries we can't see. They should have been working to get out, but boy, they should have, you knew it was coming, there should have been a better plan. Get these people out before you take the military out. If you're going to save the unarmed, take them out while you still have armed people there. You pulled away all the defenses and left them hanging.
I think that their excuse to that, or response to that, if you will, is that no one expected the Afghan army to just
But they do it every time. I mean, as you said, back to Alexander the Great, or if you look back to the end of the 1800s, the Brits were in there. That country can't be held.
But they did dissolve kind of overnight. I mean, generally, it takes a while for these things to melt down.
Biden said it would take 90 days for the Taliban to recover. It took 90 minutes. Yeah. And you can't announce a pullout without having a plan in place.
And it's the land of the proxy war for fundamentalist Islamists, unfortunately. I mean, look what all the neighbors are. Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and they got China filtering things in the south. They border
don't forget Pakistan,
Russia,
in the tribal areas.
And the Kashmir area. It's
a great neighborhood.
It's a focal point for this sort of thing. So, I mean, they were just waiting in the wings to be able to come back in. It's awful, though. I mean, you can't help but feel awful for those people trying to get out of there.
I just seeing those people so desperate to get on a plane, the people clinging to the outside of planes. I don't know what hope they had that they could stay on a moving jetliner on the outside, not actually holding on to any. Even if you had something good to grip onto, you're probably still coming off.
Frenzied terror.
Just absolutely heartbreaking to see. And I actually, at this point, I don't think there's a good way to deal with it, because these people many of the people, like the people who are translators, people who helped Canadian soldiers they should have been fast-tracked to get out of there. But other refugees in general, people who we don't necessarily owe anything to, but who we might want to help, they've got to be screened. Like, we can't just take any person running around a tarmac. I'm sure many of them are deserving of refugee status, but obviously there's going to be some pretty questionable characters salted into that crowd, and they've got to, it's got to be, because we should learn with what happened from Syria. I mean, you had the Syrian refugee crisis, terrible situation. Then you had the likes of Merkel and other European leaders just opened up the borders. Europe got flooded. All sorts of nasty characters came in, people who should have had no business in a civilized country. So these things are not easy to do. But part of the problem here was it just happened so quickly, and no one seemed to see it coming.
As our Linda Slobodian wrote in her column, she talked to a military expert who says, you can bet the Taliban's already working on fake papers to get their agents into the line of refugees and out to other countries where they can lay in wait and create havoc when called upon.
In all likelihood, although if they are smart, the Taliban, and who knows, maybe they're smart now. Who knows? Maybe they're smart. This is a new improved Taliban. Who knows? Maybe they're going to say, you know what? Let's just be happy taking Afghanistan and like consolidate our gains there for a while. Because if within a couple of weeks they blow up another building in New York, well then the American army's coming back again. Like they're not going to take that laying down. So if the Taliban, I mean, they might be crazy, but they're not stupid. So if they're not stupid, they'll probably try to just consolidate their gains in Afghanistan for a while and try to bomb us later.
Yeah, I don't think it's in their nature. I don't think it'll be immediate, but you can bet they're having agents infiltrate the refugee lines now.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up there. Again, we want to thank all of our Western Standard members for your continued support. We are greatly appreciative of what you do for us. You allow us to continue doing the work we do. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandardonline.com and click on membership. You can try it free for 15 days and get full access to bailout-free Western media. Cory, thanks for your magnetic presence as usual.
A pleasure as always.
And Dave, thank you for making sure you read all your notes before the show.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. I'm just glad Cory has never had to fake it.
Well, fake it till you make it. That's what they say. Thank you very much, all of you, for watching. Have a great day. God bless.